Very welcome, everyone, to this semester's first seminar, at which I'm very pleased and happy to introduce Karsten Paerregaard, a fellow anthropologist, who will talk under the title Searching for the New Human, Glacier Melt, Anthropogenic Change, and Self-Reflection in Andean Pilgrimage. A short introductory note on Karsten Paerregaard's very active and engaged scholarly journey. He received his PhD in 1990 and a Danish doctoral degree in 2009 in the topic of anthropology from the University of Copenhagen, where he was associate professor for a number of years. From 2012 to 2017, he was chair professor of social anthropology at the University of Gothenburg, where he worked until earlier this year. He is also, I should mention, honorary doctor at the National University of the Center of Peru. And Karsten Paerregaard has also been visiting professor at the University of Florida on 2 occasions, and he was research fellow at Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. I mentioned already that Karsten Paerregaard is a very active and engaged researcher. He has spent a full 8 years conducting field research in Peru. His work includes studies in migrant networks, remittances, illegality, fiestas, religious practices, political mobilization, family organization, social conflict, and other themes. Analytically, his research is, in brief, inspired by recent theories of transnationalism and diaspora, aiming to understand how physical and social mobility are conceived of and practiced in a globalized world. More recently, Karsten Paerregaard has studied how climate change causes water scarcity and creates social conflicts in Peru. And the focus of his research is on how Andean communities perceive and respond to climate change, and how the institutional setting promulgated by Peru's new water law shapes the country's water governance. Now, Karsten Paerregaard's publications include almost 100 books and article entries. And among his most prominent work is a trilogy of highly recommendable ethnographic monographs examining Peruvian migration. The first one of these is describing how Andean people move from Peru's highlands to its major cities. The second, how Peruvians migrate to the US, Spain, to Italy, and to Japan, Argentina, and Chile. And the third, how migrants maintain ties to Peru through remittance sending. I would also personally like to mention 3 articles of his work that I have found most inspiring and substantive. The first being the article Communicating the Inevitable, Climate Awareness, Climate Discord, and Climate Research in Peru's Highland Communities, published earlier this year in the journal Environmental Communication. I'd also like to mention the article Liquid Accountability, Water as a Common, Public and Private Good in the Peruvian Andes, published last year in the journal Water Alternatives. And thirdly, I'd like to mention here the article Making Sense of Climate Change, Global Impacts, Local Responses and Anthropogenic Dilemmas in the Peruvian Andes, published in 2016. And so I'm very pleased to invite Karsten to talk more under this very interesting title. Please.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you for inviting me to be a fellow this academic year here at SCAS. And thank you for inviting me to be the first presenter in a long series of seminars, which I look very much forward to, and I think will be extremely exciting. Let me just start by making a few words, saying a few words about how my presentation today fits into my book project. This is Peru, and my book project called Andean Meltdown, a climate ethnography of water, power, and culture in the Peruvian Andes, is based on 4 case studies, and here located 2 of them in the Colca Valley, as you see in the southern part of Peru, where I worked for 35 years in 2 neighboring villages, and then 2 other sites, the pilgrim sites I'm going to talk about today, which is Coyoriti in the southern part of the Peruvian Andes, and Huaytepallana, which is in the central part of the Andes. So what I talk about today are 2 of the 4 case studies in my book project. I got to get interested, the way I got interested in the topic of today, the melting glaciers and culture. In 1995, an Austrian archaeologist, Reinhard, together with his Peruvian partner or colleague, discovered a mummy at the top of a mountain, Ampato, 6,000 meters high, in the village of Capanaconda, where I worked, one of the 2 neighboring villages that I'm not going to talk about today, but I want to mention what he found. He found a mummy. This is his Peruvian colleague, Zárate. They found a mummy, now called La Mumia Juanita, a frozen mummy, completely complete. And here she is. She went traveling afterwards all the way to Washington, D.C. Bill Clinton received her. She went to Japan and other places in the world and became world known as a frozen mummy that is more than 500 years old and is now stored in the second city of Peru, Arequipa, in a frozen state. She was the victim or the object of a sacrifice, human sacrifice, about 500 years ago in the village of Capanaconda. Now, what I thought was interesting, a number of things, is what you discover when glaciers recede, as in this case, and which is happening in many places in the world because of climate change. So this is what got me on the track of what I'm going to talk about today. And now I'll start my paper. Humanism has recently come under attack, not only by liberal economic and political forces, but also by theoretical thinkers who criticize the conventional centering of humans in the social and humanistic sciences, and the conceptual separation of nature and culture underpinning it. The critique of humanism has given rise to new understandings of humans' position in the Earth system, and the emergence of such theories as multinationalism, posthumanism, and multi-species studies. The general message of this new scholarship is that the human is outdated as an analytical category, and that we need to do justice to other modes of existence by acknowledging the agency and importance of the planet's metabolism. More bluntly, the subject matter of anthropology and other human-centered disciplines has been put under arrest. The growing concern for anthropogenic change and humans' contribution to global climate change adds fuel to the critique of the term humanity, underscoring the need to inspect its historical and political import and invent a new theoretical framework to investigate interspecies interactions and humans' future role as the planet's steward. One fundamental question emerging from this debate is, who is the new human that holds the key to the planet's destruction and salvation at one and the same time? My presentation aims to answer this question by exploring how Andean pilgrims experience climate change. It examines ethnographically how the encounter with the retreating glaciers of the Peruvian Andes prompts pilgrims to rethink the meaning of the divine and the power it embodies, and offers them a new perspective on their own and other humans' agency. The Andes is a particularly relevant site to study how climate change and glacier retreat challenge humans' notion of anthropogenic change and their role as planetary agents. Glaciers, ice, and snow constitute a critical resource for agriculture and other livelihoods in the region, and provide drinking water to most of its households. Moreover, as the principal supplier of fresh water, mountains have been the object of adoration since the Incas created a pan-Andean empire by linking their polity to the divine force of the region's highest peaks. The conquered populations replicated the rulers' religious practices by making offerings, including human sacrifices, as you saw with Juanita, to the local mountains that supplied the water. And in colonial and republican period, the adoration has continued in the form of annual pilgrimages to some of the region's most renowned mountains. More recently, these pilgrimages have grown in number, attracting Peruvians from different economic and social classes. Driven by a wish to redeem their souls and ask the mountains for favors, the pilgrims often endure untried physical hardships to make it to the pilgrim sites. Once they reach the mountain peaks, however, they become witness to an alarming surprise. Due to global warming, the glaciers, ice, and snow that symbolize the power of Andean mountains are disappearing. Furthermore, the bedrock that appears under the retreating glaciers is covered with not only stones and species and plants from pre-human times, but also the remains from previous human activities, and sometimes even the bodies of dead pilgrims. To inquire into this conundrum, I ask, how do pilgrims account for climate change in the Andes? And how does its environmental impact challenge the ritual practices? How do the pilgrims deal with the fact that the glaciers, ice, and snow of the mountains, representing the very source of divinity they ask for help to energize their lives, are drying up? And lastly, how do pilgrims account for the effects of their activities on the mountains? And how do they envision a world without glaciers and ice? My point is that the human continues to be essential to the social sciences, and in particular to anthropology, which must ask what it means to think of human life as an intermediary state between other forms of life. I therefore propose a new approach to the human condition that urges us to think the human not as a pre-given preference or a fixed category, but as a life form in movement, characterized exactly by its being in movement, and that takes its point of departure in real people living real and messy lives in their social, cultural, and natural ecologies. To explore how pilgrims develop a new awareness of what it implies to be human, inhabiting a planet that is threatened by its own activities, I draw on Canadian philosopher Nicholas Compitis' notion of reflexive disclosure, which he defines as a critical reading of life as it appears, as well as an alternative view of how it may be. The concept's aim is to capture the possibility of an active reworking of the predefined meaning of the world humans inhabit. In Compitis' own words, this means to find the ways, and I'm quoting now, the ways in which these background structures of intelligibility are reopened and transformed through novel interpretation and cultural practices, end of quote. The reason we need to remain open to unfamiliar and seemingly irrational ways of thinking and speaking, Compitis argues, is that the reflexive world disclosure cannot be known in advance of the particular historical conditions that creates its need arise. It is my claim that anthropogenic climate change creates these conditions, and that the encounter with the retreating glaciers and the revelation of the remains they concealed provide the conditions of a planetary disclosure. That is, a reconfiguration of the social natural order that defines humans' position in the planet's metabolism. To the pilgrims, the glacier's physical disappearance and the exposure of an anthropogenic world of dead bodies, waste, and other remains on the naked bedrock are are not merely omens of a dying deity. They're also a sign that humans' relation with the mountain deities and other human beings has been radically transformed. My understanding of planetary metabolism therefore goes beyond the natural sciences' use of the term to refer to the planet's carbon cycle. Rather, my aim is to highlight the importance of human agency for global warming and the ways humans become aware of and act on anthropogenic climate change. Elaborating on the idea that pilgrimage represents a world of anti-structure and liminality, I suggest that sacred landscapes and religious shrines offer a unique setting to experience structural changes in the nature-human relationship. My point is that climate change and the glacier melt it causes not only secularizes the world as Andean pilgrims know it, it also offers pilgrims a new feeling of transcendence. By causing glacier melt, climate change both strips the mountains of their majestic image and magic symbolism and discloses the hard facts of the Anthropocene, that is, the disturbing leftovers of other humans' agency and the troubling prospects of a future world without ice and ultimately water. The planetary disclosure Peruvian migrants experience is complicated by two circumstances. To slow down the melting of the country's glaciers and alleviate its water crisis, the Peruvian government has taken measures to regulate people's access to mountain areas, including the sites for its many pilgrimages. At the same time, some of these pilgrimages are gaining the attention of international actors who hold Peru's government responsible for preserving them. How do the different interventions of these actors influence the ritual activities of the pilgrimages and the pilgrims' religious ideas? In the following, I pursue this question by exploring how a planetary disclosure may be triggered by the pilgrims' look into past human activities, as the first case illustrates, and into a future scenario of glacier disappearance and chronic water crisis, as the second case illustrates. So this is my first case, Coyoliti, which I call an encounter with the past. 2 days before Corpus Christi, which is usually in the end of May, tens of thousands of pilgrims, some argue hundreds of thousands, from different parts of Peru gather every year to celebrate an Andean Catholic image called Coyoliti. Coyoliti is Quechua and means the snow star, at a shrine called Chinacara at 4,700 meters. This is the pilgrims walking at night. Among these pilgrims are more than 8,000 musicians and dancers organized in so-called comparsas and recognizable by their distinct way of dressing and dancing. This is one comparsa, here's another. Other pilgrims dress as ukukus, who are young men dressed in human bear hybrids, and who use whips to enforce the pilgrims' unwritten rules, including a ban on drinking alcohol. You can see they all wear whips. I had a few slap on my legs when I took a photo when I shouldn't take. I don't remember really. I didn't bring alcohol. Nobody drinks alcohol here. Both the comparsas and the ukukus are organized in 8 so-called nations that constitute the organizing body of the pilgrimage. Its central activity takes place at night when the ukukus walk up and pay homage to the nearby glaciers, carrying the nation's cross. The nations have divided the glaciers 3 tongues so that one group of ukukus walk to the left tongue, another to the tongue in the middle, and a third to the right tongue. Once the ukukus have reached the glacier, they climb it and place the crosses of the nation in the ice. To endure the freezing nights, they enter a state of trance, which allows them to communicate with the ice and its metaphysical forces. Later, they initiate new members of the group by introducing them to the glacier secrets while whipping their legs as an act of redemption and purification. To galvanize the ritual, the ukukus let off fireworks on the ice, lending it a sense of festivity and solemnity. Spending the night on the ice in clothing ill-fitted to temperatures below freezing demands not only physical endurance, but also religious faith. And when recounting their visit to the glacier, many Ukukus describe the cold as a challenge rather than as an obstacle, and portray their contact with the ice as a spiritual experience that fuels their lives with energy. Until a few years ago, the Ukukus brought chunks of ice to their communities, and even to Cusco, where they gave it to the ice to the participants of the Corpus Christi festival. But Coyorite is not merely, it's not only a spiritual event, it is also an economic activity. When the pilgrims arrive at Sinacara, they are met by a group of business people who sell them so-called alacitas, miniatures of houses, cars, and other goods, as well as copies of forged professional titles. A few years ago, the Catholic Brotherhood that claims to be the protector of Coyorite and that manages its shrine built a small house at Sinacara which it rents to fortune sellers or to fortune tellers acting as bankers. Here you can see they're selling forged or copies of banknotes. Selling miniature copies of foreign banknotes, these entrepreneurs offer what is believed to be loans to pilgrims who hope they will bring them luck later on. Here's the Banco de Coyorite, and you can see this is a cuckoo who first buys these banknotes and then go to the bank and then get a receipt for a bank loan. Coyorite also has political implications. In 2011, UNESCO declared it as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, which many Ukukus have received with approval and see as proof of the pilgrimage's importance in not only Peru, but also the rest of the world. As steward of Peru's cultural heritage, the National Institute of Culture is now responsible for the preservation of Coyorite. The Institute occasionally invites the pilgrimage stakeholders to discuss the plans for mining activities within the pilgrimage area that the Ministry of Mining repeatedly presents, and from time to other raise protests among the nations, that is the Ukukus and the comparsa dancers. This is from this is for 2016 in Cusco, a major protest against mining, planning or mining in the area. Here you see, no queremos oro ni plata, queremos a nuestro Señor de Coyorite, no a la minería. We don't want money, we only want our image of Coyorite, no to mining. The other issues at the meetings organized by the National Institute of Culture are the organizational and logistical challenges created by the growing number of pilgrims and the environmental problems they generate at Sinacara. The outcome of the meetings is a working plan that aims to preserve the cultural heritage of Coyorite by regulating the growing number of trade and business activities, especially the sale of alacitas, as I showed you, and other fortune products, and improving the pilgrimage sites, toilet facilities, and garbage service. This is just one part of the whole area when it's with the pilgrims. I just wanted to show you that the only toilet facility is here, and there's actually a creek with melting water coming down here that passes under the toilet, and the sewage just goes straight under in the creek, and the creek continues down further the mountain, and many pilgrims actually take baths down the creek because the water is considered holy. Another more sensitive measure concerns the restriction of the pilgrims' access to and activities on the glacier, including a ban on cutting ice chunks and burning candles and fireworks on it. Because the glacier's left tongue has been melting so fast in the past years that the Ukukus no longer can reach it, 2 of the 8 nations already abide by this restraint. This is a photo I found, which is probably from the 50s or the 60s, taken down at the pilgrim site. If you compare it to the former one, You can see the number, how the numbers of pilgrims have grown. But particularly I want to mention the three glacier tongues, which you could see right from the pilgrim site. And walking up was very close. I took this photo in 2015. Further up, actually, if you imagine, I took the photo somewhere up here. And you can barely see the glacier tongues here. You can see the one in the middle, the one to the left, way up, and the other one almost gone. And here's another photo, not taken by me, but way up the mountain. This is the pilgrim site down here. And here you can actually see the three tongues still gone, but far up and retreating in an alarming pace. The interviews I conducted with members of the 8 nations reveal that they are overwhelmingly concerned about the retreating glacier, and that many wonder what will happen to the ice ritual in the future. Asked about the threat climate change represents to Coyoriti, the nation's spokesman said, "It's a terrible thing. The ice is not like before. It's really sad if it appears. It is really sad if it appears, because it means we can no longer conduct our rituals." Paradoxically, while the Kukus are restraining their ritual activities on the glacier during the night, other pilgrims climb it during the day. I saw hundreds of people walking on the glacier, just as others told me they had seen pilgrims returning from the glacier with chunks of ice. Reaching agreements with the 8 nations to adapt the cultural heritage of Coyoriti to climate change is one thing. Regulating the entrance to the glacier and controlling the individual activities of the growing number of pilgrims is quite another. The National Institute of Culture and UNESCO therefore face a major challenge: how to safeguard an intangible cultural heritage that is threatened not only by climate change, but also by the very people who practice the cultural heritage. And here you can see the Kukus on the ice, but the ice is hardly there anymore. Another occurrence disrupting the ice ritual is the retreating glacier's disclosure of dead bodies. Many Kukus affirm that walking on the glacier at night is a dangerous business, and that it is not unusual that some of them disappear in the glacier's crevices, with some view as a sacrifice to the glacier and a symbol of the pilgrim's gratitude to its divine power. And Okuku recounted, each year between 4 or 5 Okukus disappear in the ice. Some also die because the cold deep freezes them. He added, a few years ago, the bodies of our disappeared brothers began to appear due to the thawing. The man told me that to bury the bodies, the 8 nations have made a graveyard next to the receding glacier. And he said, up to now, we have buried around 100 bodies. One Okuku claimed that the appearance of dead bodies and the glacier's retreat are signs of a broken relationship between the pilgrims and the glacier. He said, the ice eats us, and then we eat it. But whereas the Okukus are troubled by the appearance of dead bodies on the glacier's bedrock, they are pleased by the national and international attention the event receives. One Okuku said that UNESCO's declaration of Coyoriti as a world intangible cultural heritage is the biggest acknowledgement of our faith and culture. And when I asked him about the growing number of pilgrims attending the event, he answered, I totally consent to it. It shows the whole world knows about this acknowledgement. At the same time, however, many pilgrims worry about their own and other pilgrims' impact on Sinakara's environment and the glacier. One woman I talked with during the pilgrimage said, there are not enough toilets here. We're just too many people. Another woman complained that some people harm the glacier. She told me, I've seen a lot of people walking on the ice even though it's not allowed. She claimed that the growing number of pilgrims threatens the very idea of Coyoriti, which according to her is to pay respect to the sacred forces that protect the environment. Rhetorically, the woman asked, "What is the point of coming here if we make things worse, not better?" And here you can see one of the local municipalities have put up this saying, "Taita Coyoriti te agradece dejar limpio el sanctuario. Coyoriti, please ask you to leave the sanctuary site here clean, I mean not contaminated." So there's a growing awareness here of the contamination. This is Pablo, an old-time friend of mine, anthropologist from Cusco, who went with me up to Coyoriti. We're just about the same age. And this is Pablo in his young, bright days. This is from the early 80s. And you could see here, you can see the glacier tongues, the ice, very close to the pilgrim site. And you can see this is a very local guy. This has changed completely in the last 30 years, 35 years. And here I am with our tent. As you can see, it was freezing at night, cold, but wonderful. Next site, Huaytapallana, which I call an encounter with the future. Unlike Coyoriti, which taps into a dual belief in Andean mountain deities and Catholic images, the pre-Hispanic past prevails in the annual pilgrimage to Mount Huaytapallana in Peru's central highlands to celebrate the Andean New Year on June 21st. The ceremony dates back to 1994 when an Andean shaman in the nearby city of Huancayo gathered a small group of people to pay tribute to Huaytapallana as a gesture of gratitude for the protection and prosperity it offers the inhabitants of Huancayo. Attendance remained low for a number of years, but by the mid-zeros, the ceremony gained momentum, and today more than 1,000 pilgrims attended. The pilgrims drive in cars, vans, minibuses from Huancayo to the foot of Huaytapallana's glacier and its glacier lake at 4,600 meters, where they put up mesas, tables, consisting of a woven cloth with the offering items, of the offering gifts, which comprise of a range of food items, herbs, corn beer and plastic bottles, normal beer, soda, wine, whiskey, cigarettes, coca leaves and candles, and other stuff. Some mesas also include, Some mesas also include alacitas in the form of small figures of men and women engaged in sexual acts, toy cars and trucks, advertisements for electronic artifacts, and wallets with ID papers suggesting that the givers expect to gain not only material wealth, but also fertility and legal status from the offering. Once the mesas are in place, several shamans speak in a mixture of Quechua and Spanish. The first year I participated, one pointed out the importance of living in harmony with the Apus, that's the mountain deities, and Pachamama, Mother Earth, as our ancestors have taught us. That was the way he put it. He also reminded people to pay respect to Huaytapallana because it supplies them with water. Another shaman praised Huaytapallana for its spiritual power, after which he called out the names of not only the most important Andean mountains, but also the principal elements of the earth and the universe. The man concluded by requesting Huaytapallana to receive the many offerings people have brought. The third shaman regretted the harm climate change inflicts on the mountain, using Quechua terms such as Yabasonjo, his heart is bleeding, Yakakuyan, he's sad, and Wahayan, he's crying, to emphasize the mountain's suffering. The fourth shaman started by urging the listeners to collect all waste on the ground. The man then said that the mountain's current suffering is due to the big companies that exploit and hurt the earth, and people living in cities who do not always understand how their contaminating habits damage the environment. Without Huaytapallana, he concluded, Huancayo will die. After the speeches, the first shaman looked towards Huaytapallana, raised his arms, and said in Quechua, "Great Apu, we have come here to greet you and show you respect." The solemn atmosphere lasted several minutes, after which people started to embrace and wish each other a happy new year. This is the glacier, and here are the people. Look at her, she's one of my favorites. Happy woman, with her gifts, her mesa. In the third and last part of the ceremony, people carried the offering gifts to the mountain slope, where they settled in small groups and started to prepare the act of offering. Later, I saw several individuals returning from the glacier with chunks of ice. You can hear people actually walking on the glacier with chunks of ice. Each of these, they both are hard to see, but they actually carry an icicle, ice in the hands. If you can see the light, it's difficult to see, but so they've been up on the ice and carrying back these trophies. I asked a young boy who held an icicle, here you can clearly see, why he had come to Waitapayana and what he was going to do with the ice. The boy said that he planned to take the ice with him to school the coming Monday. It will bring me luck to me. It will bring luck to me and my class, he said. Climate change, glacier melt, and environmental contamination have become urgent issues in Huancayo in the past 15 years. And to protect Waitapayana, Peru's national government declared the mountain a protected area in 2011. In response, the regional government has prepared a working plan that restricts economic activities on Waitapayana and that regulates visitors' access to the mountain, including shamans and pilgrims. Yet even though some of them are becoming aware of the environmental impact of their activities, I saw people leaving non-organic residue at the offering site and throwing offering disposals into the glacier lake. Some even took a swim in the lake, even though it's banned. To make the situation worse, rather than participating in the offering ceremony on June 21st, people contact shamans to arrange individual offering ceremonies during the year, asking the mountain for fortunes in their life, for fortune in their lives. This has not only generated a constant flow of visitors to Waitapayana, but also created a commercial market for shamans in Huancayo. The leftovers on Waitapayana is evidence of this development. Alacitas, half-burned candles, glass of broken bottles, plastic bags with food items, and even unused or even used underwear and other personal belongings, pilgrims wish pilgrims wish to do harm. Some also litter the mountain with disposable trash from the picnics they hold after the ceremony. Here's a woman selling beer and soft drinks, and here's somebody having a party. Here are the leftovers of these picnics. According to the regional government, the total amount of trash in the protected area of Waitapayana every year amounts to more than 4 tons. The dilemma of making offerings without contaminating the mountain is amplified by the pilgrims' perception of climate change, which many interpret as a local rather than a global phenomenon. They believe that Waitapayana's glacier retreat is caused by the visitors by energy, particularly when they engage in physical contact with the ice. Some even believe that humans' growing presence on Waitapayana eventually will lead to the mountain's death. From this perspective, the offering ceremony threatens rather than contributes to Waitapayana's well-being. Several pilgrims told me they were driven by a search for new energy to fuel their lives. One woman asserted that the pilgrimage provides a new perspective on life, allowing you, as she said, to re-encounter yourself in a more authentic environment. Other pilgrims told me that they conceive of the mountain as a spirit with the capacity to influence the lives of others. That is probably why some of these clothing were left on the mountain. And they regard the offering as a means to ask for personal favors. A woman said, "If I give the mountain something, it listens to my wishes and returns my offering." However, to the shaman who initiated the ceremony 3 decades ago, the offering is not a quid pro quo. Rather than employing the Quechua term pagapu, which derives from the Spanish pago, payment, the shaman prefers uncapac, which means to give. You give the apu something to express your gratitude, not to ask for a favor. the shaman pointed out to me. Asked what to do to change the misconception of the offering, he shocked his shoulder and replied, "Nothing. That's the way people are." The man also responded with indifference when I asked him about his view of climate change and the threat it represents to Waitapayana's glacier. He said, "Climate change is a political invention. The Earth has its own solution. If one kai runs out of water, people have to move or die. Life goes on," and the man asserted, "even if Waitapayana dies." In a similar vein, the shaman disregarded the regional government's claim that the pilgrims constitute an environmental threat, and that he and other pilgrims should be held accountable for the offerings items. Although some pilgrims object to the authorities' attempt to constrain their activities, others approve of it. Some even ask for more government control, which they believe is necessary to stop further glacier retreat. Asked what she thinks about the ceremony's environmental impact, a woman responded, "How can people behave like this? Imagine the damage they do to the environment." Another woman declared, "Visitors who leave garbage should be fined." And she added, "Or even better, visitors should be banned from coming here altogether." And when I asked what the organizers do to alleviate the impact the growing numbers of pilgrims have on Waitapayana, a third woman said, "Well, we're all part of the problem, aren't we?" Other pilgrims interpret Waitapayana's environmental decay as a sign that it is losing its sacred power. A man suggested that Waitapayana was growing old and that, he said, the disappearance of ice will lead to the mountain's death. He added, "It's a pachacuti." Pachacuti is a Quechua term for a turnaround of the world, head down, feet up, and the start of a new epoch in human history. And here's another sign here, El Sagrado Waitapayana es vida, no dejar basura. The sacred Waitapayana is life, don't leave garbage. So it's not that people are not warned that or told not to leave garbage. This is Carlos, another lifelong friend of mine, also anthropologist, who also the 3 times I've been at the Waitapayana has accompanied me. Carlos is now becoming a shaman. And I think it's interesting how an anthropologist can turn into a shaman. Well, this is another, perhaps later, shaman in life. And now I come to the conclusion. The interviews suggest that climate change and the disappearance of the sparkling ice demystifies the mountain's magic power, and that the melting of the glaciers and the snow caps undercuts the notion of reciprocity that shapes Andean people's relationship with the environment. But by drawing attention to anthropogenic environmental change, global climate change also produces a historical moment that lends transparency to humans' role in the planet's metabolism and its future prospects, and that offers humans a sense of planetary responsibility. The awareness emerging from this disclosure uncloaks what Compritis calls our background structures of intelligibility and pre-reflexive understanding of the world, and breaks ground for not only a new multi- and trans-species identification, but also alternative understandings of both human and non-human powers. Mountain pilgrims are among the first to experience such a planetary disclosure and to review the social natural order on which modern global society is based. Their encounter with the glacier's bedrock opens a window into humans' past doings and the ravages their current activities are doing to the world of tomorrow. The remains it uncovers are a sign to the pilgrims that the non-human powers they believe control the world are returning their offering gifts with an invisible label saying, "The expire date has passed," and a reminder to the giver saying, "To be trashed." It is also a prediction that the divine no longer constitutes a force that exists separate from the human realm, but that it is now a shared human, non-human project to rescue the planet from destruction. The task is urgent as some of the planet's many modes of existence, including the world's tropical glaciers, are bound to disappear very soon. And here comes the very last. The irony of the Anthropocene is precisely that humans are important to the planet's future, not only as sinners, but also as saviors. The question is therefore not whether the human category is relevant for the social sciences, but how we employ it in our studies and describe its continuous transformation in response to changes in the socio-environmental conditions. As the planet's villain and cause of its degradation, the new human emerging from the transformation still carries the burden of the modern human of the 20th century that post-human theories seek to deconstruct, an invasive agent pursuing his or her own need at the cost of other humans and other non-humans. But as the planet's steward, the new human also bears the seed of change, a reflexive agent aware of his or her own impact on future human generations and other modes of existence. Either way, the human category remains essential to understand both intrahuman and cross-species relations.